Cold rain hammered the Denver suburbs that November evening, turning quiet streets into rivers of shimmering asphalt. Headlights smeared across the wet road, while the wind rattled bare tree branches like bones. It was a kind of night when sensible people stayed inside, but one terrified golden retriever didn't. The dog burst from between parked cars, paws slipping on the slick pavement, eyes wide with panic. A black SUV screeched around the corner at the exact wrong moment. Tires screamed, brakes locked. The vehicle fishtailed across the lane. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze. Then Finn Walker moved. He didn't think. His body simply reacted. The 36-year-old sprinted into the street and lunged forward, grabbing the dog mid-stride. Momentum carried them both into a rough roll across the wet pavement, just as the SUV's bumper swept through the space they'd occupied. Glass shattered. The smell of burned rubber filled the air. Finn slid to a stop near the curb, his arms wrapped around the trembling animal. Pain flared across his forearm where jagged glass had sliced the skin, but he ignored it. The driver's door of the SUV flew open. Vivian Lancaster stepped out into the rain. The Billionaire CEO stood frozen for a moment, staring at the man crouched on the pavement with blood streaking down his arm while her golden retriever wagged its tail in frantic relief. Her voice came out barely louder than the rain. "Orion." The dog barked happily and bounded toward her. Vivian dropped to her knees on the soaked asphalt, wrapping her arms around the golden fur. Her carefully styled hair clung to her cheeks as she buried her face against the dog's neck. "Oh, God, Orion." When she looked up again, the man who had saved him was calmly wrapping a bandana around his injured arm while a small girl helped tie the knot. The child, maybe 8 years old, watched the dog with wide eyes. "Thank you," Vivian said breathlessly. "Is he hurt?" The man shook his head. "Just scared." His voice was steady and calm, the kind of tone that seemed to quiet the storm itself. Only when he stood did the streetlight illuminate his face clearly. Vivian felt the blood drain from her own. Finn Walker. 3 years earlier, she had signed the document that destroyed his life. Their eyes locked. Recognition flickered between them like lightning. Finn saw it immediately. The moment she remembered, something guarded settled into his expression. "I saved him because he needed saving," Finn said evenly. "Not because I want anything from you." Vivian swallowed. "I know who you are." "Then you know I don't need your gratitude." He turned to the girl beside him. "Come on, Grace. Let's head home." But before they could leave, Orion trotted back to Finn, pressing against his leg and wagging his tail enthusiastically. The dog nuzzled Grace's hand. The girl giggled. For just a moment, the tension cracked. Vivian watched the small circle they formed, father, daughter, and dog, laughing softly together in the rain. Something uncomfortable stirred in her chest. "Guilt. Please," she said. "Let me at least pay for a doctor." Finn's jaw tightened. "We're fine." He walked away with Grace holding his uninjured hand. Vivian stood beside her expensive SUV and stared after them, the rain soaking through her designer coat while a heavy realization settled over her. 3 years ago, she had destroyed a good man's life with a single signature. The world Finn Walker lived in now looked nothing like the polished glass towers where Vivian Lancaster ruled. He lived in a modest rental on the industrial edge of Denver, where factory whistles marked the hours and neighbors knew each other's names. The furniture in his living room came from thrift stores. The carpet was worn but clean. The walls were covered with colorful crayon drawings. Most of them were done by Grace. Airplanes, dogs, bright suns with smiling faces. Grace Walker was 8 years old and the center of Finn's universe. She had auburn hair like her mother and steady gray eyes like his. Once, Finn had been someone important. He had worked as a lead engineer at Lancaster Aerotech, designing propulsion systems for next-generation aircraft engines. The work had fascinated him, the elegance of mathematics turning fuel and metal into flight. Then came the accident. A prototype engine failed during a test run. Flames tore through the test bay. The investigation moved quickly, too quickly. The official report blamed faulty maintenance procedures signed off by the project lead, Finn Walker. He tried to fight it. He brought supplier logs, internal warnings he had written. emails where he protested cheaper components that compromised safety. But someone else had already shaped the narrative. Howard Cross, the operations director, presented the board with a clean explanation. Budget overruns, missed deadlines, leadership failure. Vivian Lancaster signed the termination papers without hesitation. Finn learned an important lesson that day. Some battles couldn't be won. 6 months later, his wife left, unable to handle the sudden fall from stability into financial uncertainty. Grace stayed with him, and that was enough. Now Finn took whatever work he could find, mechanical repairs, technical consulting, contract jobs that paid the bills. He fixed things with his hands because the corporate world no longer trusted him with its boardrooms. But he still had something no one could take away: his integrity. Grace never went to bed hungry. She had clean clothes, art supplies, and a father who read bedtime stories every night. Twice a week, they volunteered at the county animal shelter. Grace loved the dogs. She'd sit cross-legged in the kennels while rescue animals licked her face and wagged their tails wildly. They couldn't afford a dog of their own, but Grace drew them constantly. Her sketchbook overflowed with pencil portraits of labs, shepherds, huskies, and one particular golden retriever she had seen during the rainy accident. She had written a name beside that drawing: Orion. Across the city, Vivian Lancaster lived in a penthouse that overlooked Denver like a throne room. At 34, she ran a $3 billion aerospace company with ruthless precision. The media called her the Ice Queen. Magazine covers showed her in tailored red power suits with controlled smiles and piercing eyes. What those articles never showed was the silence of her penthouse at midnight, the frozen dinners eaten alone, the phone that rarely rang with anything except business. Her father had built Lancaster Aerotech from nothing. When he died suddenly 4 years earlier, the board expected Vivian to crumble under the pressure. Instead, she worked harder than anyone. 18-hour days, memorizing contracts, firing anyone who showed weakness. She earned respect the only way the board understood: through fear. But somewhere in the relentless grind of proving herself, she forgot how to simply be human. The only warmth in her life came from one creature: Orion, the golden retriever her father had bought her the year before he died. The dog was spoiled, affectionate, and possibly the only being on earth who had ever seen Vivian laugh without restraint. Vivian told herself she was satisfied. Success was enough. Power was enough. She didn't need softness or vulnerability. But sometimes late at night, when Orion curled beside her on the leather couch, she wondered what her father would think if he could see the woman she had become. Would he be proud or disappointed? 2 days after the accident, Vivian Lancaster knocked on Finn Walker's door. Finn opened it and stared in surprise. The powerful CEO stood awkwardly on his concrete stoop, wearing jeans and a simple coat. Orion sat beside her, tail thumping against the steps. "Mr. Walker," she began stiffly. Then she sighed. "Finn, I need to ask you something." He didn't invite her inside, just waited. "Orion has been anxious since the accident," she explained. "He won't eat properly. My veterinarian says it's psychological." Finn remained silent. "I noticed he responded well to you and your daughter." Vivian continued carefully. "I was hoping you might help. I'm not a dog trainer." "No, but he trusts you." She hesitated before adding quietly, "I'll pay whatever your rate is." From inside the house, Grace's voice floated out. "Daddy, is that Orion?" The little girl appeared beside him and gasped with delight. "Oh, hi. Can I pet him?" Vivian smiled softly. "Of course." Grace knelt beside the dog immediately, and Orion leaned into her hands as if greeting an old friend. Finn watched his daughter's joy. His resistance weakened. They needed money. Grace needed winter boots. "1 session a week," he said finally. 90 minutes at the park. "I'll pay $200. Finn frowned. "Standard rate is $80. "Then don't insult me by undervaluing your time." Their eyes met. "I know I can't undo the past," Vivian said quietly. "But let me do this one thing right." Finn studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Saturdays, 10 a.m. Riverside Park." Vivian smiled. It wasn't the controlled smile the magazines loved. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. As she walked back to her car, Grace tugged Finn's sleeve. Daddy, she seems nice. Finn looked toward the street, where the billionaire's car was pulling away. She's the reason we lost everything. Grace thought about that, then said something that lingered in Finn's mind long after. Maybe people can change. Finn didn't answer, but for the first time in 3 years, he wondered if she might be right. The night Finn's laptop chimed, the soft electronic alert cut through the quiet of his small living room like a warning bell. Grace was already in pajamas, curled beside him with her favorite blanket while he finished reading a chapter from her book. The house smelled faintly of chamomile tea and the rain that had begun falling again outside. Finn frowned when he saw the notification. It was coming from an old monitoring program he had written years ago, a program connected to one very specific device, Orion's medical chip. He opened the alert. The screen filled with live biometric data. Heart rate, dangerously elevated. Stress indicators, extreme. Location, Lancaster penthouse. Finn stared at the numbers. Something was wrong. He felt a familiar conflict twist inside him. 2 weeks earlier, he had closed the door on Vivian Lancaster, closed a chapter on everything connected to her. It wasn't his problem anymore. But Grace leaned over his shoulder. "Is Orion okay?" she asked softly. Finn didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at his daughter's worried face, then back at the screen. Finally, he exhaled. "I don't know," he admitted. Grace hugged her stuffed dog tighter. "Maybe we should check." Finn stood, because sometimes the right choice isn't the easiest one. He grabbed his jacket. "Call Mrs. Chin next door," he told Grace gently. "Tell her you're staying there for a bit." 20 minutes later, he was driving through pounding rain toward downtown Denver. The GPS signal from Orion's chip guided him through flooded streets and blinking traffic lights. By the time he reached Vivian's building, the entire block was dark except for emergency lights. Security guards looked confused when he ran into the lobby, but one of them checked a call log. Miss Lancaster said if a man named Finn Walker arrives, let him through immediately. The elevator ride felt endless. When the penthouse doors opened, chaos greeted him. Glass shattered across marble floors. A balcony door hanging crooked from its frame. Furniture overturned. And Vivian Lancaster kneeling on the floor with Orion in her arms. Her perfect CO composure was completely gone. Tears streaked down her face. When she saw Finn, relief flooded her expression. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't know who else to call." Finn crossed the room immediately. "What happened?" "Someone broke in," she said, voice shaking. "They said I needed to stop asking questions about the engine project." Orion whimpered softly. Finn knelt beside the dog and examined the wound on his shoulder. Blood soaked through the golden fur. But the injury wasn't fatal. "Not as bad as it looks," Finn said calmly. "He'll be okay." Vivian let out a shaky breath. Her hands trembled as Finn cleaned the wound and wrapped it tightly. Orion stayed still, trusting him. When the bandage was secure, Finn finally looked up. "You were investigating the accident," he said. Vivian nodded slowly. "I found emails," she whispered. She walked to her desk and handed him a folder. Inside were printed messages. Howard Cross demanding cheaper components. Engineers raising safety concerns. And one message in particular. Finn's warning memo. Buried and ignored. "I fired you because I trusted him," Vivian said, her voice breaking. "And I was wrong." Finn felt a strange mixture of emotions surge through him. Anger, relief, vindication, but mostly exhaustion. "Someone clearly doesn't want the truth out," he said. Vivian looked around her wrecked penthouse. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. Finn studied her. For the first time, she didn't look like a billionaire CEO. She looked like a woman who had realized the cost of her mistakes. "You need to go to the police," Finn said. "I will." Then she hesitated. "But I can't expose this alone." She met his eyes. "I need someone who understands the engineering side." A pause stretched between them. "I need you." Finn considered that. 3 years ago, she had destroyed his career with a signature. Now she was asking for his help. But he also thought about Grace, about the values he had always tried to teach her. Truth mattered. Integrity mattered. And if he walked away now, Howard Cross would never be exposed. Finally, Finn nodded. Then we do it properly. The next week was a blur of work. Finn reconstructed the engineering timeline. Vivian hired independent forensic investigators. More evidence surfaced than anyone expected. Emails, payment records, supplier kickbacks, years of corruption hidden inside Lancaster Aerotech. Howard Cross had built an empire of shortcuts, and when the engine failure happened, he needed someone to blame. Finn had been the perfect scapegoat. When the case was ready, Vivian surprised everyone. Instead of quietly presenting the findings to the board, she called a press conference. The conference room was packed. Journalists, financial analysts, camera crews, board members sitting in tense silence. Howard Cross stood near the back, arms crossed confidently. Vivian stepped to the podium alone. No teleprompter, no prepared speech, just the truth. 3 years ago, she began clearly. I terminated an engineer named Finn Walker for negligence related to an engine failure. The room went silent. I was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Recent investigations reveal that Mr. Walker warned management about dangerous cost-cutting decisions. Those warnings were deliberately buried. Vivian turned slightly. By our operations director, Howard Cross. Howard's face drained of color. She continued steadily. Mr. Cross falsified records and accepted illegal payments from suppliers. His actions caused the engine failure. Camera flashes exploded. I have submitted all evidence to federal authorities. Security officers moved toward Howard, but Vivian wasn't finished. She gripped the podium. I am also here to apologize to Finn Walker publicly. Lancaster Aerotech failed him, and I failed him. She paused. Because of that failure, I will step down as CEO pending a full independent review. The room erupted. Questions shouted. Board members furious. But Vivian kept her gaze focused on the back of the room. Because Finn had just walked in with Grace, holding his hand. He hadn't planned to come, but something told him he needed to witness this moment. Mr. Walker, Vivian said quietly into the microphone, would you be willing to say something? Every camera turned toward him. Grace squeezed his hand. Finn walked slowly to the stage. He took the podium. My name is Finn Walker, he said. 3 years ago, I lost my career because of a lie. The room listened in silence. But what Miss Lancaster is doing right now matters more than what happened then. He glanced at Vivian. Leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to admit them. Grace suddenly ran forward and hugged Vivian's legs. The billionaire CEO froze in surprise. Then she bent down and hugged the little girl back. The cameras captured everything. Later, outside the building, reporters still shouted questions. Howard Cross was already being led away in handcuffs. Finn helped Grace into his old sedan. Vivian approached him slowly. Thank you, she said, for telling the truth. Finn nodded. What happens now? Probably chaos, Vivian admitted with a small smile. And us? She asked quietly. Finn thought for a moment. We start with dog training sessions again, he said. Vivian laughed softly. I'd like that. Grace leaned out the window. And Orion can come too. Always, Vivian promised. The months that followed were messy. Court cases, corporate investigations, shareholder battles. Lancaster Aerotech lost millions in value, but it gained something far more important, integrity. And through it all, Finn and Vivian kept meeting at Riverside Park. At first, it was just about Orion, but slowly their conversations deepened. Vivian learned about normal life, budget groceries, school projects, parent-teacher meetings. Finn learned about the pressure Vivian carried for years trying to live up to her father's legacy. Respect turned into friendship. Friendship slowly became something deeper. 1 year later, on a warm October afternoon, they stood beside a quiet Colorado lake, a small wedding ceremony. No reporters, no executives, just family and close friends. Vivian wore a simple white dress instead of her famous red power suits. Finn wore a charcoal suit Grace helped choose. Grace, now 9, proudly served as flower girl. Orion carried the rings in a pouch attached to his collar. During the vows, Finn smiled at Vivian, A year ago you told me I saved your dog, he said. But the truth is you saved us too. Vivian's eyes glistened. You gave me a second chance, she replied softly, and I promise to spend my life earning it. They kissed as the sun reflected gold across the lake. Grace cheered loudly. Orion barked twice. Later at the reception, Vivian handed Finn a folder. Inside were papers for a new organization. The Orion Foundation, she said, developing tracking and rescue technology for service animals. Finn looked down at the document. Chief Engineer, Finn Walker. You deserve your career back, she said. Grace ran over excitedly. What is it? Finn laughed. It means Daddy might be building technology to help save animals. Grace threw her arms around both of them, and I could design the logo. Vivian laughed. Deal. As the sun set behind the mountains, the three of them stood together with Orion leaning happily against their legs. A family born from mistakes, from courage, from forgiveness, and from one rainy night when a single dad saved a billionaire's dog, and they ended up saving each other.